Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. Today, we're doing the mailbag thing, which is always fun and wide-ranging for us. We'll talk overwintering carrots in the ground, wash pack station considerations, and high tunnel orientation. So let's do it. Welcome, high tunnel. This is your farm. Right? Orientation? All right, I hope you all are doing well today. If you are a musician and doing well today, I hope you are feeling in the mood to do a cover song as well. We are hoping to get more covers of the theme song for the show next month. Like we did last September, it's our anniversary month. So if you are indeed a musician, record your version and upload that to Dropbox or Drive and share it with Farmer Mike at no-tillgrowers.com. You rock, or maybe you jazz, or maybe you beatbox. I'm game for whatever. Anyway, it is Mailbag Day, which is always fun and exciting because the topics can just be absolutely all over the place. This is the day where we take questions from our Patreon members at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers. If you ever want to support this show, that's the absolute best way to do it. All right, today's first Patreon question is from Richard Schuler, who writes, quote, "What can you tell me about overwintering carrots in the field in Zone 7A? I'm thinking that they would need to be planted very soon, but how much cover do they need to be harvested for the first market in May?" End quote. Thanks, Richard. Great question. So the first thing I'll say is that in 7A, that's the Zone 7A, May would probably be a little bit too late. The way that carrots work in the ground is that they will grow in the fall, then they will go somewhat dormant through the colder months, and then when that warmth and light returns, because they are biennials, they will jump back to life and start to regrow, but ultimately to flower, not to produce bigger roots. For instance, if you wanted to save seed on carrots, that's how you might go about it in that particular region. Either you would plant them in the fall and then protect them all winter, or you would harvest them in the fall, store them all winter in a fridge or whatever, and then replant them in the spring. That is to say, when they go all the way through a winter, that's when they know it's time to go to seed. However, there is a sweet spot, literal and proverbial, right there just before they start to regrow, in probably I would think before mid-February in Zone 7A, when they are delicious, dormant, and ready to rock. In most cases, you would want to harvest them at that point before they start to put on the new growth. Keeping carrots over the winter is risky, though, in the ground for rot and for pests like moles and such, but storing carrots can be a little risky too if you're, not watching them. However, if you were going to overwinter them in the field, here is how you would go about it, or you can go about it. First, make sure the soil you're planting them into is loose and well draining. If they sit in thick, wet clay all winter, it's going to be a recipe for rot, in case you were looking for one. Sow them now-ish, or at least before mid-September preferably. Then, in terms of protecting them, you can throw some row cover over top of them for the winter, or some people use straw. You can just literally, once those greens die back, you just put a bunch of straw over top to protect them. Either can work, though straw will completely arrest the growth, and row cover might extend it a little bit. So, you may, if you do plant a little bit later, then the row cover may lead to bigger roots. You just preferably would not want the ground freezing and thawing a bunch of times, especially not right in a row, so you will want them as protected as possible from the cold. Then you would harvest them in that late window that I talked about. However, one last thing to consider is that harvesting carrots in the winter is often a miserable job. It's cold, it's muddy, it's wet. I don't know. Those are kind of things that I don't love to just pair together if I don't have to. I tried this a few times, just kind of overwintering them in the field, like planting them, like my late carrots, and then just harvesting them as I needed them. And ultimately just ended up losing most of the carrots to pests, or just kind of threw in the towel because it was taking me half the day to harvest a small bin of carrots out of the mud. A tunnel, either low or high, is an excellent place to do this. However, if you have one, we have had success many times planting a late carrot and harvesting it, in the warm, dry tunnel in January and February with less discouragement. So often we try and sow those by October 1st, and then they grow all the way through December and into January, and then by mid-January you're harvesting them. But again, that is in the tunnel. I'd be curious to hear what others' experiences have been with overwintering carrots in the field successfully. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, wash pack, be right back. Patty whack, I don't know, other rhymes. BRB.
I like milk, sweet fat milk in the morning. Meow. I stay up late jumping most nights. Meow. My kitty cat, my kitty cat. She's even friendly with the rats.
Today's episode is brought to you by Good Agriculture. If the season is picking up and the pile of receipts is starting to grow, you're not alone. Good Agriculture handles farm bookkeeping so you can stay ahead of the mess before it piles up. They keep your books organized each month, help you understand what's coming in and what's going out, and show you where your farm stands so you can make better business decisions throughout the season. If you're behind, they'll help get everything caught up. They also help farmers find funding and stay ahead of grant deadlines. You run the farm, they help the business. Learn more at goodagriculture.com/info. That's goodagriculture.com/info. All right, back to the show. All right, so obviously the Patreon page is a great way to support our work, but as a bonus, we like to answer your questions. If you ever have an in-depth question, and I see them in the comments sometimes, you all do have some in-depth questions, or just really want to support our work, or do both, you can head over to patreon.com/no-till-growers and sign up. We thank you for helping us keep this info free and open to anyone and everyone in the world by supporting us. And as a bonus, like I said, I'll answer your more in-depth questions. All right, moving straight along through our Patreon mailbag. Today's second Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Ricky Kennedy, who writes, quote, "Hi Jesse, I have ideas for a combination prop house and wash pack shed, but interested in what you think I should consider before I get too far in the design. It would be a wood framed building around high tunnel size, and the farm is around 2/3 of an acre. Half of it veg and half of it eventually fruits. How much space would you want for propagation, wash pack, storing in a walk-in? Would you separate the spaces or keep it open? Would you store a BCS and implement in this space? Zone 6B, and hoping to also put a dwarf citrus tree in here. Fingers crossed. Thanks." End quote. All right then, Ricky, an ambitious but interesting project. Sounds fun. So there are a million and one variables here, so I will do my best to address as many as possible. The dwarf citrus tree, just starting there, is going to take up a fair bit of room, just FYI, unless it's in a pot and or you are going to, heavily prune it. It's going to be quite large, and you'd want to take at least, I don't know, I'm just kind of guessing here, but like a 20-foot diameter space for that if you were going to have it in the ground, maybe more, to give or take. Only you can know how much space that will take up, so you can add it in after I break down the other elements to consider here. Don't get me wrong, I have a lot of love for a good tunnel citrus tree, but to do it right, it takes some work, and also ventilation, heat, space, etc. All right, so first, what you plan to grow will determine a lot about the propagation side of things. Like, if you're wanting to focus mostly on baby greens in the field, for instance, that are primarily direct seeded, then a large prop house is probably not as necessary because you're not going to be working with as many transplants. If transplants, however, will be a big part of your production, then you will need a relatively substantial table space. If you intend to sell plant starts, well, an even larger prop house will be a requisite. So it's hard to say how much exactly you will need without those sorts of details. But the formula you would use is essentially just to come up with a simple crop plan, if you don't have one already, and figure out when you will have the most plants in the prop house, typically the spring, right before tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant, etc. go out. How much space would you need for the number of trays at peak production? That's really what you have to figure out. Obviously, the tunnel won't be at peak production all year, but what you want to avoid is having more plants than that space can hold when you're at your busiest. And also, if you want to do microgreens, etc., account for that as well. And also, while I'm on that subject, pick up this excellent new book from Green Hanch. I think it is on pre-order now. I got it advanced copy because my name is on the back because I said something nice about it because it's a great book. But anyway, if you did want to get in microgreens, they take up a lot of space as well, or they can. You can also stack them, so that's nice. Anyway, now for a 3/4 acre of mixed veg, we got away with about a 30 by 15 foot greenhouse high tunnel little thing made from a Farmer's Friend cat tunnel kit. So that could be a decent starting point for you. But again, it depends on what you're growing and if you're selling plant starts and all those things. Large tomatoes and peppers, for instance, will take up a huge amount of tunnel space heading into the spring. So yeah, it's really just kind of a math problem. Now, for washing, packing, and storing, again, that depends on your crops and market. For us at peak season on 3/4 of an acre of intensive production, we were cramped in our 8 by 8 by 9 foot cooler. That's about as small of a space as you'd want if doing an intensive, like market garden. Our washing, packing space is a little flexible, like we have a pretty good size space there, but we have 3 large stainless steel tables. Those are 6 foot by 2 foot. A 3-bay sink that I think is about 8 feet long, and several standing racks. That would, again, when we were at peak production, get quite backed up, though the restaurant racks help a lot, verticality and wheels for the win. So I would think for your scale, whatever that square footage would be for your tables with 4 feet of walking space around you would be pretty sufficient. Some back of the napkin math gives me roughly like 200 or 250 square feet or so minimum for like a wash pack space. I don't think they necessarily have to be separated as long as you can wash/pack in a place that's not overly hot, save for the winter when the warmth will be welcomed. We also have a separate area for washing root veg, so that adds a little bit to the washing space. You want a space where you can wash off the really dirty stuff before bringing it inside if you are doing stuff inside, but is easiest when placed outdoors. And then for storing things like a BCS, like you can store those more near your plant propagation stuff. You wouldn't want to be starting engines and stuff right around where you're washing food. So if you are going to do that, I'd put that on one end and then your wash pack stuff on the opposite end. Anyway, I hope that is mildly helpful. It's hard to say for sure exactly what you will need, and you may find you need more or less space based on what you're growing and how successful you are at it. So maybe just build into the idea an opportunity to build on more. In general, though, it's all just math. If you can get a good crop plan together, the information for how much space you need is in there. You just need to tease it out. All right, you all tell us what you think, listeners and viewers. In the meantime, we're going to take one last quick break, and when we come back, we ask the ancient question, which way doth the tunnel point? Be right backeth. Today's episode is brought to you by Holden Tool Company. Holden Tool Company is a family-run business specializing in high-quality hand tools and small-batch manufacturing for growers of all kinds. They offer forged hoes, forks, scythes, sickles, pruning tools, orchard tools, and forestry tools featuring traditional European designs that are hard to find at ordinary garden centers. These tools are practical, durable, and made for people who typically do work by hand. Holden Tool Company provides thoughtful customer service, helping you choose the right tool for your body, crop, or task. Find them online at farmandgardentools.com and use the code NTG26 at checkout. That's farmandgardentools.com. All right, back to the show. Okay, so we've got one last reach into the mailbag at patreon.com/no-till-growers. This one from Lee Kossib. Hi, Lee. Lee writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. Would love to hear your take on the best orientation north/south, east/west for tunnels. Different considerations for season extension versus just protected growing versus best orientation for both purposes, and how does latitude impact context for best orientation? Other considerations. Thanks for being awesome." End quote. All right, great question here, Lee. For me, over the years, my view on this has changed a little bit, but the biggest thing I land on when it comes to how to orient, a high tunnel is not necessarily light, but wind. You know how I feel about wind at this point. It's the worst. I mean, we need it. Plants need it for photosynthesis, spread seeds, it carries bugs. It does a lot of good things for us, but it's also just the worst. But if you live in an area that is even mildly prone to high winds, then you will still want to think about orienting your tunnels based on the prevailing winds. What's annoying about this is the recommendations I see are often to face your tunnels perpendicular to the prevailing winds, basically have the broadside facing the prevailing winds. I don't love this idea. The reason this is often recommended is to prevent the tunnel from lifting from one side and basically like peeling back, but also to ensure the best ventilation. But I have seen more than a few high tunnels whose broad side was facing the wind get smashed to the ground or literally like pushed, have the bars that are in the ground literally pushed into the tunnels, or to have just seen the tunnel completely flattened to the ground in a big wind vent. I mean, without proper bracing, this can happen regardless, but I find some peace of mind having ours face to the south, basically facing into the wind, as long as there's good wind bracing and that front side is really well secured. That also provides relatively even sunlight throughout the year, according to research. East to west may be better, especially in northern climates for year-round production in terms of light, but it's somewhat negligible unless you're trying to grow tomatoes all winter or something and planning on heating that particular space, like you really need to maximize something that you're heating. If you're in a really warm area, the north to south orientation can be a little bit too much sunlight and make it slightly difficult to cool unless you have really good ventilation, like a ridge vent, which I recommend. East to west can be easier to manage in the heat, in other words. So if you're in a warm climate and want slightly easier heat management in the summer, but you're worried about wind and the broadside of the structure, you can also plant windbreaks to help out with that, just to kind of slow any heavy winds down. Now, Another side of this is your land is going to dictate much about how you place your tunnels. Our tunnels are facing south and slightly southwest, and that's how I wanted them, frankly. But that's also because that was just like what made the most sense on our farm. Like, yes, if you're trying to squeeze every ounce of production out of them all winter long, then you can really do some research into sunlight in your latitude. But for most people, including most professional growers, having a tunnel just in the best spot for you, that for your gardens, that you have it regardless of orientation, is going to be more than fine. For me, wind is number one. Number two is maybe making sure that it is in a place that will drain well and that the shade from nearby trees is not going to be a huge issue, especially in the winter when the sun is low. So big trees south of the tunnel that may not have any effect in the summer can cast large shadows when the sun is low in the sky to the south. You also don't want it necessarily shading the rest of your gardens too heavily in the spring, or you will just have to, account for that shade in the crop plan. Like if they're on the south side of everything else, there may be some shade issues in the spring, like the tunnels will cast a big shadow that you'll just have to be aware of. And that's pretty much it, I think, in my opinion. Otherwise, others can feel free to chime in with their thoughts. It's certainly quite easy to overthink it, for sure, but in many cases, the land will dictate a lot of how you orient your tunnels. And of course, I like the tunnels to be close to home. I think that's important. Like, I wouldn't want to put my tunnel in the ideal position and have it be on the other side of the garden in the wintertime when I kind of need to be out there opening and closing the tunnel every day. Otherwise, I think that is it for this Thursday. If you've ever stuck with this show this long, you know that No Till Growers is a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. So you can consider kicking in if you can afford it. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Big thank you to Michelle. Big thank you to the No Till Growers Board of Directors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you sign up in the few days we have left to call August, you get a shout on the shows. Although no new signups yesterday, but all good. Stay tuned tomorrow for the shocking conclusion, get it, of our story and Feedback Friday. We'll do both. All right. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you then. Bye.